So we got an email the other day at our offices at Apologetics Press, and it was a couple missionaries who had been studying with a lady who was from China, and she had grown up as an atheist. And she did not believe in God. That was the cultural, basically, baggage that she was dealing with. And they were talking to her about becoming a Christian. And she said, I really do want to be a Christian, but I just don't believe in God. Can you help me? And so, here's what we learn about becoming a Christian. The very first thing that you have to nail down in order to ever become a Christian is an understanding that there is a God in heaven who created this universe. And some people very, very sincerely struggle with that, and they want to know, how can I know God exists? And what lots of people have been told, and why this is a problem, especially in our society, is that you can't know anything unless it can be touched, seen, tasted, heard, or smelled. Unless you can use your five senses on it, then you can't know it. Now, the fact of the matter is, that's never been how people have ultimately come to lots of the knowledge that we have. And so what I'm going to do this evening is, I think I'm going to help us see that even though you'll never be able to see God while you're here on this earth, and you'll never be able to touch God, you'll never be able to, I am going to show you how you can know things about God. Now, suppose you're walking on a beach, and you look down on the beach, and you see a set of footprints. And these footprints are all going in one direction, and you look up the beach, and there's no person that you see. All we have are footprints. Would you ever have anybody that would say, hey, there's no way these footprints could have been made by a person because we don't see any people? No, that's not how you would come to the conclusion there. You would look at the footprints and say, what do the footprints look like? Is there anything we can know about who made these footprints? And so we're on the beach, we see the footprints, and we start looking at them. And in the footprints, they are feet from a human, and each foot has 5 toes. You can see the arch of the footprint. You can see the fire that just came out. You can see the arch of the footprint. You can see how far apart the footprints are. You can see how deep down in the sand that they go. And so here's what you can know about the person. You've never seen the person. But can you know how many toes the person has? Yeah, they've got 5 on each foot. How many toes do they have? Okay, they got 10. Well, hold on just a second. Wait just a second. You didn't see their feet. How do you know they have 10 toes even though you've never seen their feet? So here's the principle you're learning that was written by Paul in Romans chapter 1. Here's what he said. And it's a real weird statement as you read it. If you read it like it is written there, here's what he says. For since the beginning of creation, God's invisible attributes. Now, what is something that's invisible? You can't see it. It's not visible. You cannot see the thing. So listen to what the verse is. God's invisible attributes are clearly seen. The stuff you can't see about God, you can see. Well, how much sense does that make? I thought they were invisible. No, you can clearly see them being understood by the things which are made, even His eternal power and Godhead. So here's what we've got. We've got these footprints. We count the toes. We know that the person who made these footprints had 10 toes, and we've never seen their feet. Now, that's not all you can know about the person. In fact, if you start measuring the distance between the footprints, you can find out about how tall the person is. You take that distance between those footprints, you go back and do some statistical analysis, and you see that people generally with that distance of print between each foot are 6 feet tall. If you got real good equipment, you can check the density of the sand and see how far in the sand that the footprint is deep. So you know the density of the sand, you do some calculation with gravity and mass and stuff like that. So now here's what we got. You've got a person that you know has 10 toes, that you know is approximately 6 feet tall, and as you calculated the weight, you know this person weighs between 160 and 190 pounds. Now, you've never seen the person, but there are things about the person that you know for a fact, even though you've never seen them. And so we come to this idea about God, and we ask the question, what do we know about God having never seen God? And the first thing that we can discover that we know about God has to do with something that you use every day. It's the law of cause and effect. Law of cause and effect is simply this, that for every material effect you see in the universe, there has to be a cause that came before it and that was greater than it. Now, as you look at that idea, we have been told from the atheistic community, the people that don't believe in God, that 13.8 billion years ago there was a tiny singularity that exploded and brought the whole universe into existence. The question you have to ask is simply, what caused that? Because the law of cause and effect says that there has to be something, if that is a physical material effect, there has to be something that caused that. And here's what else you know, that the material effect can't cause itself. And so you've got something at the beginning that was not material that brought the universe into existence. Now, that idea of the Big Bang and 13.8 billion years ago, that's false, but you have to have something that started the universe. And here's the next thing that you have to have. You have to have something that's bigger than the universe. Now, let's see how big our universe is. Let's just see if we could measure that. If you wanted to go across the universe, now, we don't exactly know how big this is, but for many years they said it was about 46 billion light years, and then they changed that to 98 billion. Here's what that means. A light year is how fast how far you can go in 1 year traveling the speed of light. Okay? Getting real complicated here, but here's the fact of the matter. The speed of light is 186,000 miles per second, 7 times around the earth in 1 second. Now, let's say you can travel that fast and you go for a year. How long is that? It's about 5 quadrillion miles. But if you were on one side of the universe and you could go the speed of light, work with me. Let's say I had a bus that would haul all of us. So I get everybody on the bus and I said, all right, guys, strap up. It's going to be like the night bus on Harry Potter. We're going to take off. So get ready. We're going to go the speed of light, 186,000 miles a second. And I put it in gear. G-forces are pulling your face backward, and we're going, you know how many years it's going to take to get across the universe? 96 billion years. And then at the end of this article where they doubled the size of the universe, at the end of the article they said, but some people think it might be 250 times that. So now you're going to have to fly 96 billion years times 250 to get across the universe. Now, whatever made this universe had to be huge, had to have unlimited power. So here's what we've got from that first idea of the law of cause and effect. The creator of the universe couldn't be material, and the creator of the universe has to be bigger than the universe. And the universe is 96 billion light years across. So the first aspect of what you can know about God is He's always been here, and He has to have all power. Now here's the second thing. You can know about a God that created this universe. Suppose you're walking on the beach and you look down and there is, after the footprints, you see a laptop computer. And you pick up the laptop computer and you press the on button and it is fascinating. In fact, this laptop computer is the fastest processing laptop computer that you've ever seen in your life. and you are wondering how this laptop got on the beach here, and a guy comes to you and he's wearing a white lab coat, and you introduce yourself, and this guy oddly is walking on the beach with a white lab coat on, and it says he's got a PhD in personal computing origination. Wow. This man's got a PhD in where laptops come from. Wow, isn't it lucky that you happen to run into him? And so you have this laptop and you present this laptop to the guy and you say, can you tell me where this laptop came from? And he says this, yes, millions of years ago, something like lightning struck this beach and caused plastic to form. And you say, well, I know that lightning can strike sand and cause glass to form, but plastic, have we ever seen that? And he says, no, but this is made out of plastic, and so it had to have happened in the past at some point. And that plastic was washed out into the ocean, battered against coral reefs and like, and it was cut into the perfect size keys. And those keys were washed through a school of squid that has that squid ink, and somehow in the tumbling through the squid ink, the letters that you read on these keys somehow formed on the keys. And while that was happening, copper ore was washing down from a nearby mountain, got into one of the hydrothermal vents, got caught on the back of a turtle and the tail of a shark. They went opposite directions, and a bunch of crabs snipped those copper wires into the perfect size, and those copper wires... Okay, you're starting to see the problem. You take the computer back, you say, I appreciate that, thank you, and you look on the back of it and it says Dell. What do you know about the computer? You know that a functioning computing device does not come about through accidental chance processes. It doesn't matter how much time you have. It doesn't matter how much energy goes into something. If there is not some intelligence behind the construction, you don't ever get a computer. Now, let's put that into practice as we think about what we see in this universe. Right now, we've got about 130 of the most powerful computing devices that the world has ever seen. Now, I didn't know this until I started doing a little research, but they say that it feels like unbaked bread dough if you touch it, if you poke on it. Now, let me explain to you what I mean by that. If you were to have brain surgery, it would hurt when they first started cutting your scalp area and then your skull. But once they got to your brain, you don't have any pain sensors on your brain. And so when they poke on it, I don't think they do that randomly, but if they did, you would just feel pressure on your brain. The brain is about 3 pounds of matter, but it's the most complicated 3 pounds of matter in the universe. Now, if you compare it to a computer, here I found to be one of the most fascinating statements that I've ever heard. There are so many connections in your brain that there are more connections and switches in your brain than in every single personal computer and router in the world. Now, take a thought of that. In your one brain, I'm not saying in everybody's brain, I'm saying in your one brain, there are more connections and switches than in every personal computer in the whole world. And even people who don't believe in God say it's the 3 pounds of the most complex matter in the universe. You can process information at 270 miles per hour. And you have the capacity, you have the ability to learn 40 different languages and remember billions and billions of bits of information. In fact, I was reading about a lady who she has it's a phenomenon called hyperthymesia. Here is what hyperthymesia is. she remembers everything she's ever done in the history of her life from the time she was 14. Now, she has memories that go all the way back to when she was 9 months old and has shown that. But everything she ever has done, ever has said, ever has anybody said to her, she knows every bit of it. So she was going to a doctor who understands and works with people who have memory things. And she said, look, all my life I have felt like I've got a memory that's not like other people's. But I didn't even know there was a doctor like you. He said, well, we'll test you and we'll see, how good your memory is. So he starts giving her this test, and he gets to November the 11th, 1972. And he says, did anything happen that day? And she says, no, not on a global scale, but before that, something did. And she told what happened that day before. And he said, no, you're wrong. That didn't happen the day before, it happened this day. Now, he'd been given this test for years, as I understand. And she said, no, I'll tell you, I remember exactly where I was that day. I was sitting right in front of my TV. I was wearing this particular sweater. I was eating this particular food. And I remember that coming on the TV. I know exactly what I'm talking about. It was this day. And he said, no, it wasn't. I've been giving this test for years. I know exactly what day that was. She said, go check it. So, okay, he does. Been giving this test for years. Goes and checks it. She's exactly right. He had been given that test wrong, sounded like for years, and she knew exactly where she was, exactly what she was eating, what she was wearing, the day that the thing he said happened the next day actually happened the day she knew it did. Can remember every single thing she ever has done. That's what your brain is capable of. Now, if you were to compare it to a computer, you can do that. There's a computer in Kobe, Japan. It's called the Fugaku supercomputer. Cost $1 billion to create over several years. This Fugaku supercomputer can process information at 0.5 quintillion operations per second. Now, how many is that? I don't know. I don't even really know how to calculate what a quintillion is. You could look it up and see how many zeros are there. It's just 0.5 quintillion. That's all I know. It takes up 2 full tennis courts. Okay, 2 full tennis courts of processing units. It uses 400 million watts of power per hour. 400 million of them. 2 tennis courts, 400 million watts per hour. The problem with the whole supercomputer business is that with that many watts, the heat output of the stuff is so high, you have to have all kinds of cooling agents to cool the supercomputer. At 0.5 quintillion operations per second, your brain processes 1 quintillion operations per second, which is twice as much. Takes up 1,300 cubic centimeters, which is only about 10 tennis balls, and uses 12 watts of power an hour, 12 compared to 400 million. Now, when you walk into a building that's being mechanically cooled by all kinds of devices that cost that cost 999 million plus $1 billion. Do you look at that and think, wow, I didn't know you could get something that originated through time and chance processes over multiplied millions of years? No. What do you know when you walk into a building and there's a computer like that? Wow. Whoever designed this was a genius. And yet then you've got your 3 pounds of a brain that processes stuff twice as fast, that uses a tiny, tiny fraction of the energy that you carry around on top of your shoulders, and you compare it to a supercomputer, what do you know? Whoever designed your brain is more intelligent than the group of people that designed the supercomputer. In 1976, there was a debate that went down in Denton, Texas. And in that year, there was a guy who was the world's leading unbeliever. His name was Antony Flew. And he had written a paper called Theology and Falsification. And that paper for about 60 years was the most popular atheistic paper in the whole world. And for about 60 years, this guy was known in the world as the leading unbeliever. And he was debating a guy by the name of Thomas Warren. Now, Thomas Warren was dealing with this design argument and showing, hey, exactly what the Bible says. Every house is built by someone, but he who built all things is God. And so, Antony Flew is there. He is trying to defend the idea of unbelief. Thomas B. Warren is there saying, no, there is a God. And Thomas B. Warren has an old, you probably have never seen him, but this was an old overhead projector. An overhead projector is where you put a little piece of plastic that has a drawing on it, and it projects the picture up to the screen through a light on the bottom. And he put a projector slide of an artificial hand, a prosthetic hand. And he said to Dr. Flew, the atheist, he said, Dr. Flew, did this artificial hand have a designer? Now, here's what's interesting. Artificial hands and feet and arms and things have come a very long way. It's a study called prosthetics. And several years ago, they designed one that cost $4 million just to make, weighed 10 pounds. It was an arm that had both sections with a hand. And there was a 26-year-old Marine, young lady, who had lost her arm in a motor vehicle accident. And so they hook up this $4 million arm. Here's the fascinating thing. They take nerves out of her shoulder and hook them to wires in the prosthetic hand and arm. So that literally when she thinks about moving her pinky finger, well, if I understand it right, they miswired it to start. And she would think about moving her pinky finger and it would move her thumb. And they had to train her to think, okay, no, you thought that was your pinky, but just work with it. It's your thumb. Oh, okay. So then they trained her to think about moving the right digit, and it literally would move from the nerve connected to the wires. And the guy who was in charge of this prosthetic research, Dr. Kukin, he said, this is amazing. He said, we've never seen anything like this. This girl can now take her artificial hand, her prosthetic limb, and she can take a jar of spaghetti with one hand and a spoon with the other hand, and she can scrape out the spaghetti sauce. And he said, we've never seen anybody be able to do that with prosthetics like we've got. Said she can fold a pair of pants without having a hard surface. He said, we've never seen anything like it. But then in the conclusion of the article, after he talks about a $4 million arm that took scientists thousands of hours to make, he said, but it's clumsy. Clumsy compared to what? Okay. So, Dr. Warren says to Dr. Flew, he's got the picture up there, he says, Dr. Flew, you're the leading atheist in the world. Did this prosthetic limb have a designer? And that was 76, and prostheses weren't near as good as what I just described. Dr. Flew said, to the question, did this artificial hand have a designer? He said, yes. Okay, so then, Dr. Warren takes the slide off of an artificial hand and he picks up his slide of a human hand and he puts it on the screen. And he said, Dr. Flew, did this human hand have a designer? Now, go back. Dr. Kukin said, you know, this amazing prosthetic hand is awesome. It's the greatest we have, but it's clumsy compared to what? Your human hand. Now, let's think about this for a second. Let's say you have a hammer and you're working outside on a fence or something, you're holding a nail, and you take that hammer and you accidentally miss that nail and you hit your finger and smash the bone in your finger. It's going to be painful. But do you know the second that happens, your body immediately begins to repair your finger? Number one, it sends an enzyme down to your finger that dissolves the pieces of bone that you're not going to use for the repair. Now let that sink in. You have in your body the ability and capability to produce an enzyme that dissolves bone. What if that goes crazy one morning? You wake up, the enzyme didn't get turned off when you wake up. But somehow that enzyme only dissolves the little pieces of bone that aren't going to be used. The other pieces, if they're big enough, your body begins to move them back into place to make sure they grow and are solidified and they don't get dissolved. Many times where you break something is stronger after you broke it than it was before. Now sometimes it's crooked. That thumb right there, I broke when I was in 6th grade, works perfect. But it's a little bit more crooked than my right thumb. Sometimes it's not exactly back aligned perfectly, but your body repairs itself. Now let's ask this question. Take a hammer to a $4 million metal alloy prosthetic limb and smash a finger. And come back in 6 weeks, what happens? Still broken. What's the only way that finger gets fixed? There's one way. What's the only way it gets fixed? Take a big firework and blow it up. No. Throw it in some kind of machine that spins it around a whole lot and hope the pieces get back together. No. There's one way a prosthetic limb gets fixed. A smart, intelligent person puts mental energy into repairing that prosthetic limb. So, Dr. Warren puts a human hand on the screen and he asks this simple question. Dr. Flew, did this human hand have a designer? Dr. Flew says, what should he have said if he's going to be honest? Yes. What did he say? No. Not if he wanted to remain the leading atheist in the world. That was in 1976. In 2007, he came out with a book that was titled, There Is No God. The no was crossed out so that the title read, There Is a God, How the World's Most Notorious Atheist Became a Believer. And he said, I have always tried to follow the argument where it leads. And I have looked at the design in this universe, and especially DNA and the design in the coded system of life. And he said, there is no way that that could come from accident. I have come to the conclusion that there is a supernatural, all-powerful, intelligent creator behind what we see in this universe. So, back to my original story. This lady who grew up in an atheistic country that wanted to become a Christian, but just couldn't get over the idea that God doesn't exist. They called us and they said, do you have any information that would help with that? And we said yes. So we sent a little book. It was called, How Do You Know God Is Real? It was on a 4th through 6th grade level. Just had the basic arguments for the existence of God. Design, the argument that if there is objective moral value, there has to be a God for a standard. The argument of the law of cause and effect, what we've just talked about. And they thought they weren't going to get to hear from her because she was going back into mainland China. So they send her this book and hope for the best. Well, about 2 weeks later, she sends them an email and says, hey, I became a Christian. And they say, well, I thought you were having a problem with the existence of God. And she said, that book that you guys sent me answered every one of my questions, and I know for a fact that God exists. The first foundational pillar of becoming a Christian is that you have to know that God exist. And I'm here to tell you this weekend that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth is the most accurate statement ever uttered about the existence of a universe and your place in this universe. And so what I'd like us all to do is just follow the argument where it leads. And that argument will bring us directly to the feet of a creator.